Well, hello and welcome to the Alliance Against Seclusion and Restraint live series. My name is Guy Stevens. I am the host of the podcast here. I am also the founder and executive director of the Alliance Against Seclusion and Restraint. And I am excited to have you here with us today. I was thinking about this the other day. I don't even know how many episodes we have at this point, but it seems like it's probably around 200 or so episodes we've done. So we've been doing this for a while, and it's always a lot of fun to have amazing guests join us and have conversations and share things and have you, our audience, participate in this as well. So thank you for being here today. If you are perhaps joining us for the very first time, and it's always fun to have new listeners, if you're here for the very first time, a little bit about us. The Alliance Against Seclusion and Restraint was formed in, 2019. Time just keeps on ticking by. Initially looking at the issue of restraint and seclusion in schools around the nation. Our mission is really much broader than that. It's not just restraint and seclusion. It's a lot of the punitive and exclusionary discipline, of course, restraint, seclusion, suspension, expulsion, corporal punishment. But even above and beyond that, it's all the things we often do to others in the name of behavior. And our mission is really about informing changes in policy and practice and education and doing things to make a positive difference in the world and make a difference for children, for teachers, for staff, for families, for communities. And we really feel strongly that there are better things that we can do to ultimately change the outcome for a lot of children and a lot of others that really will benefit from that. A little bit more about a couple of announcements here. If you're joining us here for the first time, I do want to encourage you. And in fact, whoever you are, if you're joining us today, let us know in the chat who you are and where you're joining us from. It's always fun for us. It's fun for the guests to see who's on with us live, where you're coming from. We have people from all over the world that will join in for the podcast. We have a lot of people that will watch it later, not while it's on live, but we always have a great group that's on live as well. And if you are on live, let us know in the chat who you are and where you're from. And I do have a couple of announcements that I want to share, a few exciting things going on. I'm going to bring up my screen here. One of the things I wanted to share with you is we've been doing a couple of kind of holiday-related promotions and requests. One of them related to Black Friday, which was just recently here. We actually put on sale, a very special sale, a learning bundle. And if you go to learning.endseclusion.org and you'll see our Black Friday learning bundle, it's actually a bundle that includes two events that we did this year, the Supporting All Brains Conference and the Beyond Behaviorism Conference. Together, those would normally be, I think, $110 or so. We're doing a Black Friday special. It's 75% off. We've never done a special quite that high. And would encourage you. It's I don't even know how many hours of learning it is, but it's a tremendous amount of content. Really encourage you to consider taking advantage of that. Another thing to mention, kind of related to specials, we are doing a Black Friday special as well in our store, and we'll put the link up to that as well. But if you go to our store, we're doing 25% off our merchandise, and that really kind of puts it just a little bit over the cost that this merchandise cost us to produce. And it's a great time. So if you're looking for some Alliance shirts or some of our stickers or other really kind of amazing merchandise that we have, check out the store, and it's a good time to take advantage of a once in a year special that we do. Also want to mention, kind of in the vein of Black Friday and Giving Tuesday, we did put out some requests really related to, if you want to provide some support for our work. We are a very, very small nonprofit. We do rely on donations and other financial support. We even have an option now that enables you to join the Alliance. And when you join the Alliance, you're actually able to make monthly contributions starting at just $5 a month. And a $5 a month contribution means a lot to us. It can really help us to do the work that we're doing and bringing things like our podcast to you. So just want to encourage you, if you're able, consider making either a one-time or a reoccurring donation. It really helps out. And as we're nearing kind of that end of year time frame, it's a good time to think about that end of year giving. So if you want to support our work, I encourage you to check that out. So with all of that said, let's get to why we're really here today. And I'm always excited to have there's so many amazing special guests that we have, and today is no exception. We have Staci and Susan from Making Sense of Autism, and I'm going to bring them up and introduce them here in just a second. But we're going to be having a really interesting conversation and presentation today. So get ready. And again, let us know if you're watching live, who you are and where you're from. And let me go ahead and bring our guest up and do a quick introduction. And there they are. I see Staci and Susan. So let me tell you a little bit about Staci and Susan. Staci Neustadt is the CEO of Making Sense of Autism, is a licensed speech language pathologist with over 20 years experience providing individual and group therapy, training, mentorship, and leadership. In 2019, Staci joined Susan in developing the Neuro-Strengths Based Support for Autism Framework. Staci is passionate about creating a paradigm shift for therapists to holistically support autistic clients, for their autistic clients to feel seen and heard as they build on their strengths and contribute their gifts to their community. So, really excited to have Staci here with us today. And Susan Golubock is a retired occupational therapist, and of course we have a speech language pathologist and an occupational therapist. Two of my favorite kinds of people, so that's fun. Susan received her master's degree in occupational therapy from Western Michigan University in 1968, and a master's of education degree in special education technology in 1995. She was diagnosed on the autism spectrum in 1999. Most of her career has been spent in school-based practice. Susan has been a keynote speaker and presenter at various conferences. Susan developed the Neuro-Strengths Based Support for Autism Framework, which comes from her personal experience as an autistic individual and professional experience. And this is really where the best things come together when you have that experience, both the lived experience and the professional experience. As an occupational therapist who worked with autistic clients, she grew up trying to be like everyone else. And unfortunately, we still live in a world where sometimes the system is trying to make everyone be like everyone else. And that's why it's great to have approaches like the approach that the two of you have developed here. You have succeeded in masking, but at a cost that of never developing a sense of self, which led to symptoms of post-traumatic stress. And we see that all too often today in so many of the children we support here. And when she was fully diagnosed in her early 50s, she learned that there were other options for how to think and behave, which radically changed her life for the better. Susan's passion is to educate parents and professionals so autistic individuals in their lives are understood. And it's a pleasure to have you both here. And of course, this is not your first time here. So I guess I will say welcome back. Thanks for joining me today. And I'll just add one other little bit to your intro. In addition to the amazing work that you're doing there in Making Sense of Autism, you, of course, have been a supporter of the work that we've been doing here at the Alliance. You have been sponsors for events that we have done, and we greatly appreciate that. We really appreciate the opportunity to collaborate with people that are doing the kind of work that you're doing and really the life-changing work you're doing. So welcome to both of you, and thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you for having us again. We're excited to be here. We feel very strongly with your mission as well. We definitely see the need to help students feel understood in school as well and change the way that some of the students are treated in school. So that's kind of what we want to talk about today, because there's that mystery behind behaviors where we just want to band-aid things and hope that they get better, but it's not working.
Yeah. We spend a lot of time trying to change things we don't understand, right? So when you focus on the behaviors and you focus on changing the behaviors and not the understanding, you never really get to the proper level of support. And that leads to the things that you were talking about, Susan.
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah.
So I know you have a great presentation queued up for us, and I'm going to bring that up here on the screen here in just a moment. I do want to let people know if you're watching live, and again, I will say in the chat, let us know who you are and where you're from. I do want to just point out one person that's already weighed in. Andy is a Alliance volunteer in St. Paul, Minnesota, and Andy has done some really amazing work in this space as well, written some fantastic articles about their lived experience and the changes in the world that are needed. So Andy, great to have you here. And others, if you are watching live, let us know in the chat who you are and where you're from. I'm going to actually disappear once your presentation comes up, and you're going to go through your presentation, and I will be here in the background if you need anything. So if you say my name, it's almost like the genie. I'll appear, and I don't know if I'm about granting 3 wishes, but I will appear. So if you have any issues or have any problems, just let me know and I will pop up. But at the end, what we'll do is we will, I'll come back and we'll take questions or comments or have a little bit of a discussion about what you're sharing today. So if that sounds good with you, and just one more welcome here, Sarah from Rochester, New York, also an Alliance volunteer. So great to have Sarah here. I am going to go ahead and bring your slides up on the stage here, and they are here and ready. So we are now on your first slide. So unless you need anything from me, I'm going to hand it over to you. And unless I hear my name, you don't have to say it 3 times or anything like that, but I will appear if you need anything. So I will hand it over to you now.
Wonderful. Thank you so much.
Thanks.
So today we want to share a little bit about our Neuro-Strengths Based Framework and thinking about how to assess those hidden meanings behind behaviors. Because as we mentioned before, sometimes it's hard to figure out where is this behavior coming from. But when you assess it through the Neuro-Strengths Based Framework that we have, it really does reduce that stress and increases connection with the individual. So why does this matter? Because behavior is communication, but only if you know how to read it. So oftentimes behavior is labeled as non-compliant, avoidant, aggressive, shut down. I often read IEPs and I see these terms in them frequently, but really it actually reflects an unmet sensory, emotional, cognitive, or communication need. And again, what happens is we see this, we label it, we try to band-aid it or try to offer rewards, but we're not meeting the underlying need. So this behavior continues. Go ahead, Sue.
So, why should we assess and interpret assessments for autistic individuals differently than we do for typically developing children? I think this cartoon is definitely my favorite, and it says a lot. The cartoon is in front of a variety of animals and non-animals. He says, for a fair selection, everybody here has to take the same exam. So please climb that tree. Now, it's pretty obvious. The fish is going to be the most disadvantaged in climbing the tree. The other ones have their own advantages and disadvantages, but to make an assessment that compares everyone to a standardized norm is doing those that have developed neurotypically differently an unfair advantage. Now, Albert Einstein made the statement, everyone's a genius, but if you judge a fish by its ability to climb a tree, it will live its whole life believing it is stupid. And I will get to that, my personal story, that why I relate so strongly to that. Standardized tests are not norm for the autistic population. And these tools don't align with how the autistic brain accesses, processes, or expresses information. So without an affirming tool or trained observation, we miss the strengths that an autistic has, the potential strengths, things that they want to and are trying to achieve, the barriers that are getting in their way, the triggers that cause them stress. And we are mislabeling that behavior as part of the disorder and saying, well, it's because they're autistic, they act that way, instead of understanding the needs that behavior is trying to communicate. It feels better. Oh, our lens. Okay, we want to talk about autistic nonverbal communication. And behavior is a form of nonverbal communication. And autistic body language is different, but not absent. People say, oh, it does nothing, or I don't see it. Well, it's because you don't know how to interpret what you are seeing. Autistic use gestures differently. Our movements patterns are different because our bodies don't operate in exactly the same way. Where we fix our gaze when we're looking at things is going to be different than the way typical people would. How we pace ourselves, the tendency to freeze when things become stressful for us, the use of scripts. All of these are it's not that typical people don't do these things, but autistics often do them differently. And so they signal what we're trying to express, not defiance and not wanting to conform and be like everyone else. That is just who we are and the way our brain works. Autistics use the thinking brain. Research has shown there's a lot of struggle in making connections within the brain. So we have to oftentimes think our way through things that everyone else does easily and automatically, which results in the fact that we're much slower to respond because it takes us longer to process things than the easy automatic responses you're able to give. And yet people interpret it as we're ignoring you. We're not, because we're not responding within the time you expect us to. And when we misinterpret those cues, it accidentally increases the stress on the autistic individual to try to meet our expectations. So now we become anxious and nervous. And what do you do when you're anxious? You freeze. Well, so you can see it escalates the whole problem. So instead of responding, now I freeze because I don't know how to respond. I'm not responding within the time. You're getting upset with me. I don't know what to do. It merely makes the whole process difficult.
So the real question is, instead of how do we stop this behavior, shift our mindset to what is this behavior protecting the individual from or helping them get?
Let's look at the Neuro-Strengths Based Framework that I established. We all want to go to number 3, where we want the child to be engaged in learning and achieve goals. Well, in order to get that, you need to be able to go down to number 1, understanding the individual's needs. And how do you do that? By looking at what their strengths are, what they can do, so that I can build on those strengths. I mean, picking goals from out of the air that have nothing to do with their abilities, their current abilities, creates a lot of stress. Look at their potential strengths. What it is they're trying to accomplish that would be meaningful for them, and working on those as your goals. What about the barriers? Looking at, okay, what's getting in their way in terms of how they process things, the time that it takes them to process. This is understanding the autistic brain and how it functions, and the differences in the way it functions. And also, what is it that you are doing or that's happening around that individual that triggers them to be in a state of anxiety and stress? Because you can't learn when you're in a state of anxiety and stress. So it's important to look at it. And then there's what I call the unready state, i.e., mental fatigue. I've worked my way through this. I just can't think one more second about things. I'm drained. I don't understand what's going on, so I don't know how to meet your expectation because I don't understand the words you're using. I can't visualize it. All of those are unready. I'm just not ready to learn. And if you can't recognize that unready state, then you're going to become upset. You're only going to make them more upset. It's not going to get you what you want, which is engagement and accomplishing goals. So in order to bridge between 1 and 3, you can't implement the supports that would help them get to stage 3 if you don't understand what their needs are to begin with.
And we found that through assessing individuals through this lens, the triggers start to go away, or even better, the individual starts to have more self-awareness about the triggers and can advocate for what they need in order to not be triggered. The barriers start to go away because other people start to see, oh, this is the support, this is the accommodation you need to get around this barrier. And then also that unready state is recognized more, which can really be a trigger sometimes if they're not ready. So when you address or identify and become aware of the barriers, triggers, and unready states, that creates a safer environment so that the individual is not triggered to escalate in the school setting. So I want to tell you about a little girl, 6 years old, and the struggle the school was having was elopement. So her strengths that we identified through our assessment was she loved predictability. And we noticed that because routine, she would kind of create her own routine throughout the day. So it's not like these kids are necessarily saying, yes, I love predictability. It's through this observation, it's through this shift of lens that we see, oh, yeah, they love predictability. They do best in that environment. She loves having a routine, knowing what's going to happen next. She's also a Gestalt language processor, which is, if you're not familiar with that, it's where sometimes kids might use scripts from movies or scripts they hear mom and dad say or around the house. But it's important to note that because sometimes the script might not mean exactly what they're saying. But when you discover that they are a Gestalt language processor, you figure out how to understand what they're trying to communicate. And that really is a great strength of communication that the individuals have. So her potential strength, what we were seeing her want to do, but either she didn't, she needed help with, or actually sometimes the adults needed to be more aware of this that were around her, where she was really trying to regulate herself and trying to get her needs met, which is why she would elope. Elopement is, either trying to escape something, so trying to get out of something that was not regulating, maybe the fluorescent lights, the too busy of a room, or she was trying to elope to something she wanted in order to regulate. So some of the barriers were communication. She does have an AAC device, but like I said, being a Gestalt language processor, people didn't always know what she was trying to communicate. And really the barrier was that the adults in her life did not understand what she was communicating, which made it difficult. And then her triggers were pretty significant, not accessing something she needed or wanted in order to self-regulate. So some of the supports we provided were a visual schedule. So she knew exactly what was going to happen next. And we also were able to work on problem solving and planning with something changed. We're not going outside to play today. It's raining. So we're changing the schedule and it's going to play inside. Let's see what our choices are now. So even with visual schedules, you can actually teach other skills like flexibility and problem solving and planning. Other people modeling on her device helped her a lot with being able to navigate to what she wanted to communicate, and quick phrases she maybe wanted to say, like she loves the incense machine. And so they programmed that on there and showed her how to advocate for the smells that helped her calm. Predictability with boundaries. I know that the biggest misconception with child-led or, letting kids kind of have autonomy is that it takes away boundaries. No, our kids still need boundaries, but you can provide that predictability of, her being able to have this visual schedule, have those things that she needs in the time and the place when it is time to do those things. And that helped a lot. And then training the staff, we are actually training her whole school district. And mom has already said that this school year has been her best school year she's ever had. So the staff understanding how she communicates and her sensory needs has made a huge difference. Another kiddo that we have is an 8-year-old male. His strengths are communication, language. He's highly intelligent. His potential strengths, what he wants to learn but struggled with because he doesn't have the skills, social communication, self-advocacy, and self-awareness. Some of those barriers that were getting in the way were his self-awareness. understanding what was triggering him and what kinds of tools made him feel better, what kinds of tools made him feel worse. Some of his triggers were being overwhelmed, if there was new people coming to his house, if there were too many people, and then how to solve problems was very triggering. So the support we provided was our problem solving tool. Problem solving is something that is not used enough. And he's 8, but he actually started learning this skill at 6. I have a 3-year-old I've been working with who will say to his mom, "Mom, we have a problem." You can teach this skill at any age. And what it does is it teaches them how to either ask for help if they need help figuring out solutions, or it helps them come up with solutions on their own so they don't escalate when a problem happens. Give and take, that idea of a balanced relationship. I give you what you need, you give me what I need. And that relationship goes back and forth. And then the interoception, that self-awareness of what is triggering him. What does that feel like in his body when he is triggered? And what makes his body feel better? And again, just his family and everyone understanding how his brain works. And it really has been amazing for this little guy. And don't get me wrong, he has aggression still. He actually recently had an event where unfortunately he was suspended, but the problem wasn't him. It was the people around him. Holidays are very triggering. It is overwhelming. And they were just pushing and pushing and pushing, and it triggered him. And so again, sometimes it's not the individual, it is us. So why the old models fail? The ICD and the DMS lens is what's wrong with this child, right? Like that's where we go for giving labels and identifying what's wrong with the individual. The schools, the clinic systems, how do we reduce these symptoms? How do we stop these behaviors? The ABA lens, how do we increase compliance? How do we get them to do this? But our lens is how do we understand the brain and reduce the stress so communication becomes possible? I'll Sue share.
Now, this is where I want to tell you my story. I grew up with very protective parents. They knew I was different. But no one ever talked about it. In fact, they went out of their way. They didn't want me to feel bad about being different. So they thought if they treated me like everyone else, that I don't know whether they thought no one else would notice I'm different. But they went out of their way to treat me like everyone else. And in fact, they would praise me. In fact, I felt the only praise I ever got was when I did things that they expected every child should do, in the way every child should do it. And yet I knew I was different. I was smart enough to realize people knew things that I didn't know. They did and said things that I couldn't understand. But the message that got through to me was being different was bad. In fact, really so bad that no one would even talk about it. So I never felt accepted for the person I was, only for the person people wanted me to be. So I ended up self-complying. Number one, I found that the quickest way to get people out of my life, because I didn't understand them, they were overwhelming, they had expectations I couldn't necessarily meet, was to be compliant. Do what they asked me to do, and they would leave me alone. Well, where does that come? Do you wonder why I struggle to have any kind of social connection? I didn't understand what it felt or meant or even felt like to feel loved or welcomed, be wanted to be with me. I ended up developing chronic traumatic stress, and I still have symptoms of chronic traumatic stress because of so many years of being the good, quiet, compliant child. And yet everyone thought, oh, yeah, she's such a good child. And yet it research is being shown that it impacts negatively on the child to be pressured to be what they're not and never recognized for our differences and how those can be strengths, and we can use those strengths to be able to accomplish what we're seeking to accomplish, rather than doing it in ways that don't make any sense to us and that we don't end up using. So be aware of trying to impress on a child that compliance is a good thing without that understanding.
Thanks, Sue. So the shift really is from trying to fix to understanding. And here's some common reframes. So instead of labeling a child as non-compliant, maybe they just need predictability in their life. Instead of avoidant, maybe they need that safety feeling. Instead of attention seeking, connection seeking. This one hits so true. And whenever I hear it, I help the parents or the teachers try to reframe it. Really, they're seeking your attention because they just want that connection. They just want that social interaction with another person, especially little kids. When I go into daycares, they are like magnets, and they see I'm playing with this other kiddo and they want that connection as well. Instead of manipulative, maybe they're just lacking the communication tools. Maybe they're lacking the executive functioning tools. And so they try to get out of things because they're like, I don't have the skills to do this. So instead of using some of this language, shifting to what shows we're understanding their needs.
Okay, what people miss when they only see the behavior and not the message that's being sent behind it is because autistic individuals are often very slow to process. So they think, they label it as, well, you're not being cooperative, or why are you not responding? They can have hidden pain. Research has shown a very high percentage of autistic individuals have gut-related pain problems. They have joint problems because they're low muscle tone. All of these co-occurring conditions that can contribute to pain that they don't know how to identify. It's there. They're uncomfortable, but they don't know how to express what it is. And yet, so when you're in pain, you can be much more irritable. And so, but if they're irritable, then they get blamed for not being compliant or cooperative. They can be flooded emotionally. When you're in a state of confusion, I don't understand what's going on, this person is making an expectation. Anxiety floods your system, and stress, all of those things, and we can experience it so intensely that emotions drive you to action. We feel we have to act on what we're feeling, but we don't understand what we're feeling. So we just act out. And that's what's happening.
And Sue, I want to note on this one, I feel like I've worked with, I know, this is the big myth that autistic individuals don't have emotions or feelings. And it's just like, oh my goodness, some of the individuals I've worked with have been the biggest empaths I've ever met. And they care so deeply. And like you said, that emotional flooding, that can, when they feel so deeply, that can come out as behavior for sure.
Absolutely. And then it is very typical. We have very poor body awareness. In our muscles and joints, we don't know what our body is doing unless we see it. I had to practice for hours in front of a mirror so that I could know how to smile when someone says, smile for the camera, because I didn't know what my face was doing if I couldn't see it. And so how can I perform a skill that you want me to do when my body doesn't seem to know how to do it? Executive functioning. If I can't feel any sense of control or organization over my own body and the way my brain works sometimes, how am I going to ever feel like I have the executive functioning skills to be able to control and organize the world around me? And how I do things, where I do them, at what time do I do them? In terms of when I feel that I don't have the skills to perform what someone's expecting for me, I am going to act to protect myself from that expectation. So I'm going to divert your attention, or I may just leave or just say, refuse to do so. But those are the behaviors you see because I know I can't do what you're asking me to do. I don't know how to do it. The same thing with self-trust. I know internally what I can do. But if you're telling me because you expect it of me, or you think I should be able to do it, because other typical children my age can do it, therefore you assume, and what's easy for you is hard for me. So I don't necessarily trust your judgment in making expectations of what I can or should do. And so I'm protecting myself.
So we want to introduce, we did make a simplified free quick tool. We have some bigger assessments that go along with our course that'll be available at the beginning of next year. But we have a quick little tool just to get people started, because this is a huge mindset shift. And it's called the Strengths, Stressors, and Support Quick Assessment. And what it does is it helps you identify the strengths that maybe you're missing. We often, our brains just want to see the deficits, look at what they can't do. But with this assessment, the first thing you talk about, you observe, you ask the teacher, you ask the parents, is what do they seek to do? What are they good at doing? What can they do on their own? All their strengths. It helps guide you and look at behavior through those different domains that Sue mentioned before, the strengths, the potential strengths, the barriers, the triggers, and unready. What are they unready for? And then we provide the language for that documentation, and it really maps the hidden meaning behind what they're trying to communicate. When we ask, like, what does the individual avoid or what triggers them, it gets you starting to think of putting all these pieces together of, oh yeah, they do every time get upset during math class. And then you start putting the pieces together and figure out that language skill or the working memory skill that's required in math, and maybe that's a barrier for them. And so when you kind of put all these pieces together, it helps not only guide the goals that you will support, but then also what accommodations would help this individual. And it really helps you identify the immediate supports that work. As I mentioned before, we have a problem-solving tool. We also have a tool to help kids who are perfectionists and understanding how sometimes things are too hard, sometimes things are too easy, but we're in the just right zone. That means we're learning. So before, even as a speech therapist, before Sue introduced this framework to me, I used to write assessments that looked like this, where I talk about the individual as not being agreeable to therapy services, visibly stressed, doesn't seem to like speech therapy, repeatedly refuses items and denied participation, often covering face or bearing face into mom, and then due to the level of distress, just aborting the assessment. And then you can see even from this description, this is probably an individual who might have difficulty in school and escalate and have a hard time regulating himself. But now the way that I see these assessments or see the individual is him crying, holding on to his mom and saying no. He has a strength in advocating for himself, seeking that comfort of his mother's lap. Mom is a safe person for him and is motivating for him. yelling, "No meter, no cars," until the clinician stopped playing the video. He has persistence with getting his needs met. And then having that blanket to hold on to throughout the time he was at the clinic, he does have some sensory items that help him regulate. So you can see with this new lens, we see individuals so differently. And then we figure out what support's going to work. So you might even think about the child who yells no. I have had lots of these, and I know other therapists have had lots of these, and teachers have had lots of these. But thinking about even that simple word no, it has so many different meanings. But I know our brain immediately goes to refusal. Oh, they're refusing. But really, did you ever think that the no meant your expectation scares me? I don't know if I can meet your expectation. I can't process the information you're sharing. All of these things could be what the individual is really trying to tell us. So instead of going to, well, if you do this, you'll get iPad, or if you do this, you'll earn your recess, which, oh, I hate that one. Instead of doing those things, ask, oh, I hear you telling me no. Is it too hard? Do you want me to show you first? There's a lot of supports you can provide instead that show that child, hey, I hear your no. I see your frustration. I'm here to help. So why this matters, especially with what seclusion and restraint has to do with seclusion and restraint, is that misinterpretation, stress behaviors is the number one predictor of restraint. And when adults understand the meaning behind behavior, that behavior drops and the escalation stops. So understanding prevents trauma, both for the staff and the youth. You think about the trauma that seclusion and restraint causes for kids and for the staff. But if we just take a minute to stop and understand either what that verbal no or that nonverbal shutdown is communicating, we can avoid all of these traumatic events. So it's not refusal, it's protection. Once safety and predictability return, communication returns too. So this is a QR code for our quick observation tool that we've created, and you can download it and use it immediately. And it even has some tips on how to use the information. And as I mentioned, our bigger course will be available again in the beginning of the year. And we do have a live workshop we're doing on Monday, December 18th or 8th, this upcoming Monday. It's called Seeing the Signals, Understanding Autistic Nonverbal Communication When You Get Stuck. Because we all get stuck. Or maybe we're not even stuck, but we're just not in the moment and realizing, oh yeah, that's what you're communicating. I've been there even after 20 years of being a therapist. So we're holding that on Monday. It'll be interactive with Sue. And remember, you're not here to fix. You're here to understand. And this is where you can follow us. Thank you.
Oops, and I'm back. Thank you so much. So always appreciate you sharing your work and all the things you're doing. And appreciate the connection as well between the things that we really share in common, which there is a lot of. As I was listening to this, I was, occasionally jotting down a couple of notes, with just a couple of thoughts that were crossing my mind as you were sharing all of this, and a random quote as well. There was just a quote every once in a while that really stuck out to me. So we're going to spend a little bit of time just having a bit of a discussion and maybe a Q&A. So anyone that is watching live right now, if you're watching live and you have a question or you have a comment or you'd like to know more about something, feel free to put a message in the chat, and I'll try to get to those as we're going with this discussion. But let me just start with a couple of the things that I've made note of. And I guess initially I just want to start by saying that, there's so much of what you say that, and I think this is probably why we've collaborated in the past, but there's so much of what you do and what you teach and what you believe that really is very similar to the things that we talk about a lot, which is, kind of moving beyond the demands for compliance. And I mean, I'm a big believer that there's a lot of harm that is done in the name of compliance. But we also talk about, you were talking in one of the later slides there about how misinterpretation is the number one predictor of restraint seclusion. And, I say it a little differently, but it's really the same thing, which is, kids that are misunderstood, being misunderstood is one of the greatest things that leads to restraint, seclusion, suspension, expulsion, corporal punishment. So many things come from kids that are misunderstood. And of course, we know there are certain children that are far more likely to be misunderstood. Yet much of what is being done out there on scale is not about understanding children differently. And that's one of the things that makes your work different. And of course, we both have worked, or we all have worked with people that are also kind of aligned in this journey. But much of what's being done out there is really looking at the behavior and looking to change it, not getting curious, not trying to understand why, not trying to really get a deeper understanding, because that's where we're able to support people and give them, the help and support they need. So often, and I've said this many times, but, when I talk to a family of a child that has been restrained or secluded or had other things done to them, beneath the surface, if you really want to get to the cause, is a child whose needs we have failed to meet. And that's what it's all about. So first, I just wanted to say, I love the work. I love the fact that it's driven by curiosity and understanding. I think we also are very aligned in, behaviors, communication, but it's also biology, and it's our nervous system, and it's all these things that are going on. So I just wanted to get a start there that I love the things that you're sharing here about stopping, I wrote kind of note, stop focusing on compliance 100 times. The compliance is so much what gets us to where we end up in power struggles and with children who don't even understand the expectations that are being placed on them. So, appreciate all of that. A couple of things throughout this that Susan, you may said something at one point that I love this quote. It was very simple, but you were talking about, I didn't know what my face was doing if I couldn't see it. And again, it's just like the realization that, I mean, of course, that makes perfect logical sense, but the realization that there's always things below the surface, I think, is so critical to all of this.
Absolutely.
You can't understand what you've never experienced. And I think that's what makes it so hard for people and so easy for them to misinterpret, because with the body sense, you feel when you're smiling, you feel what your body, the feedback that your body is giving you. But if you don't, and they can't imagine what that's like, because they've never experienced the way autistics experience things.
Right. And it at times don't seem open to the idea that people can experience things differently. And I think that's so important, right? Yeah. So I wonder too, you were talking about kind of the autistic brain and responding kind of in a different time, kind of a slower response. And I don't know are you familiar with the work of, I think it was Daniel Kahneman, who wrote a book called Thinking Fast and Thinking Slow. Are you familiar with that? Yeah.
No,
really interesting. Yeah, I read it a number of years ago, and it talked about, and of course, some of this was just kind of trying to illustrate and this idea, but he talked about kind of two systems of thought. And obviously not biological systems per se, but just kind of the way that we think and process things. And he talked about kind of how we have this first system that kind of takes things in and is more reactive and more apt to kind of have judgments and kind of a very quick moving system. Like we often make decisions about things without really being thoughtful about them. And the second system is being much more kind of thoughtful and deliberate and, kind of really putting mental effort. And I think we all may do that to a certain degree. But the thing is, I guess, when people think along different timelines, people see someone who is going to that kind of second system of thought, thoughtful reflection, as being non-compliant or being, non-responsive or, so that really struck me as interesting, kind of that, that connection there between, kind of the time it might take to process things and how people process things differently. And that seems to be really key here. So anyway, that just I thought was really interesting about what you were saying. And, I think so much is that we are, again, expecting, and then many of our responses are trying to make everyone the same. And that is like the wrong goal.
Absolutely. I mean, we value diversity in nature. How boring would life be if there were one tree, one flower, one whatever? And yet conformity seems to be the driving force for our expectations of ourselves as humans.
Right.
And it doesn't make any sense, because if we all knew exactly the same thing, did things in the same way, we wouldn't need each other.
Right.
But we need each other because of our differences. We can help and support each other in ways in which, so it doesn't make, it's very illogical.
Yeah. Absolutely. So I have a comment or / question that I want to bring up from a listener. And that is, we hear a lot of people use the phrase maladaptive behaviors, maladaptive verbals. We've encouraged concerning or interfering. Do you have any other suggestions? And obviously, the words that people use mean a lot. And the thing that always gets to me is that the words that people use are often inferring intent where there is none. So I'm kind of curious, what's your thought on that? Somebody using a term like maladaptive behavior. Do you have recommendations or thoughts?
I'm going to say people tend to label behaviors as well. If we understand the behavior and the labels implies there's an understanding, such as the pathological pervasive demand avoidance. And I've had autistics that embrace that. Oh yeah, that's me. And it's like, excuse me, that is highly negative in terms of that you're demanding avoidance. Most autistics say, no, it's a demand for autonomy. We are standing up for ourselves. That's the positive side of it. So labeling something maladaptive, no, it's differently expressed. But does that make it maladaptive when it isn't conforming to the norm or the expectation that people have? And so, yes, we need to switch the language we use to describe that behavior we're seeing, because then we tend to fix things that sound, if they're negative, they need to be fixed to be positive.
Right.
If we start with positive, we're not going to try to fix something that's positive. We're going to work with something that's positive.
Yeah, I've long been a fan of kind of the social model of disability versus the medical model of disability. Of course, the medical model looks at things through that lens of deficit, disorder, dysfunction. What is wrong with somebody? How are they different from the typical? Where a social model looks at what are the barriers? How do we remove barriers to enable people to accomplish the things that they want to and are trying to accomplish? And I think even changing mindset can be really important. And when we say things like maladaptive, we're making judgments. And, of course, the words that we use to describe children, and often these words are used in front of children as well, they're internalized. And the things that people say about us affect the things that we think about ourselves. They affect our own actions as well. So there's a feedback loop that happens, I think, when we use language to describe people. I mean, what I'd love to do is have people shift into thinking about curiosity rather than thinking about the behaviors as maladaptive behaviors. That's behavior that makes me really curious. Let's go learn something. That's behavior that makes me want to understand the deeper why of what's going on. Let's reframe some of these things away from looking at the problem to trying to understand, what's going on beneath the surface and how do we support that?
Yeah. And I think even, I know, Catherine, you mentioned switching it to concerning and interfering. That is really the same. Like I was saying, it's still describing the behavior. So we don't want to describe the behavior. We want to describe maybe even what is that individual trying to achieve? Is he trying to escape the classroom? Well, then we look at, okay, if he's trying to escape the classroom, what need or what's overloading in the classroom, or what need is he trying to go get? So it would be more looking at what's behind the behavior. So
Right.
not describing the behavior, describe this individual's strengths. And then really what you're going to describe is the supports. Maybe they're escaping out of the classroom because they are overwhelmed and they need sensory breaks, or they need, walks in the halls. So I would describe it that way. Describe it as what the individual needs, because then think about it. Someone's going to pick up that IEP and they're not going to be like, oh, great, this kiddo is going to be hard. They're going to be like, oh, they need walks in the hall when they transition between classes, or when they transition between tables or whatever. So I would describe it more as the need the individual needs versus the behavior that you're seeing.
Yeah. Yeah. There's a lot of words that people use, and I'm not a fan of misbehavior or bad behavior or any of that. I mean, it's to me, even things like concerning behaviors of concern, or whatever they may be. Even that I think is kind of missing. That very often these are more than anything stress responses. Like, it's an internal stress response to something that has kind of dysregulated that person's nervous system. And when you say behavior, you think intent, and that's one of the problems here in general, is that we think behavior and we think intent, when so much of this, I mean, when I began diving into some of the neuroscience of this, when you understand behavior through that lens, you really look at it differently. And when you look at a stress response, that's something you're a little more empathetic towards than a behavior, which again kind of implies that, somebody's trying to, give us a hard time. Nicole just jumped in and said, on point, labels are a problem. And again, I mean, I understand that labels can make things helpful to talk about, but I think, again, they can also have a lot of impact and unintended impact, and they frame how we think about the solutions. So, when we think about, we kind of centralize it as maladaptive behavior. We look at the child, the one with probably the least skills and experience, as the one that has to solve all the problems, which is what's wrong with so many of the behavior plans that you have no doubt seen out there in some of the schools, is they center the problem there. I wanted to ask you, you talked about your problem solving tool, and I wonder if you would talk to me a little bit more about that. I mean, I'm a big believer as well in kind of collaboration, right? So shifting away from doing things to kids or doing things for kids or telling them what they're going to do, to how do we collaborate with them? How do we work together to solve problems? And I'm always amazed by the strength of problem solving that kids can have when you bring them into the conversation, and the really, I guess the solutions that they will come up with, how effective those can be. And we all do better when we feel like invested in it, right? I mean, I don't want a boss coming to me and saying, well, you're going to do X, Y, and Z, and you're going to do it because of this. I mean, I want one that wants to collaborate with me and wants to, value what I think, and, all of those things. So tell me a little bit more, if you would, about kind of your problem solving tool that you talked about.
Yeah.
Well, it starts with identifying the problem, the fact that there is a problem. But if you identify the problem as a form of judgment, i.e., one person says what they think the problem is, and we're going to solve it from my perspective and my judgment of what it is, as opposed to, like you said, collaborating with the individual. It's a two-way thing, just like communication. Solving problems, it's between two people. So both have to be invested in it. So it's a matter of identifying a problem that the other individual agrees with. Yeah, that is the problem. I agree with you on the problem. Then you can switch to identifying, okay, why is it a problem? What is it you need from me? And what it is I need from you? Let's talk about our needs. And if we solve the problem, it's got to meet both of our needs. It doesn't work if it's just one way.
Right.
So then we can look at solutions. Okay, and again, never offer solutions that you're not willing to live with, especially if you're the adult and that's the child. But you invite them. What do you think? What are your solutions? And why would those solutions, maybe some of them will work and some of them won't work. The same thing, the solutions I put. If you say, yeah, those solutions won't work for me, let's find ones that will work. And yet it still has to be the person that has to implement it, that has to make the choice of how to solve that problem. And that's what our form does. I created it so that it goes step by step by step to help you work through the process of solving a problem collaboratively, and one that's going to work.
Yeah, I love that. Staci, do you have anything you want to add?
Yeah, so it's a free tool. If you have the link, and Courtney can add it, it's www.makingsenseofautism.com and then /problem-solving. And so you can load. And we have two tools, because we created one for individuals that have the language skills to talk about different solutions, what's going to happen if I choose this solution, and then which one do I want to try. And then for our kiddos that maybe are limited communication or processing is a barrier, we have a trial and error guide where it's literally, let's try this solution. Did it work? Did it not work? And kind of that simple interaction. But I have to say, it is by far my most used tool that I use in every single session. Not even necessarily as a visual, because I'm so used to it now. I'm like, we have a problem. Should we do this? Does it work? Doesn't work? And it helps. It helps just kind of that, talking about that nervous system. It just helps bring that calmness, because it's like, okay, I've got a solution.
Collaboration builds connection and trust. And connection and trust leads to safety, and safety leads to thinking, logical, rational brain, and problem solving, right? So, I mean, all of these things, when you invite kids into that problem solving process, I think it's so very powerful. So let me ask you two questions. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. One, how do you help adults shift away from unilateral problem solving, which is what adults tend to do? Adults tend to think, okay, well, how about this solution, or how about that solution? And I think that's really important. So let me pause there. That's question number one. I've got another one for you, but how do you help the adults kind of shift away from that idea of being the problem solver? Because we love to solve problems, but we often aren't listening enough when we do it. So what are some of the things that you do to help encourage adults to really listen and let the child take some lead in that problem-solving process?
So first, actually, we did this yesterday with the district we're training. We explicitly teach them, and they're like, oh yeah, that's right. Step one is, what does the child need? What are they saying they need in this moment? Which we talked about today. Number two, what do you need in this moment? And then how are we going to problem solve and work together? And that works really good in those behavior moments. But you're right. Like, even seeing that as a problem is really, really hard. So first we explicitly teach them, and then implicitly through just natural interactions, even reflecting back. Okay, what were some problems that were problems today, but I missed it. I didn't even realize it was a problem. So really that self-reflection of, okay, what could I have done in that moment? And then it just takes shifting that mindset, and it just takes time, but people do start to kind of shift and see how it helps their daily life.
And it was interesting in the training session that when I brought up the idea of, no, you tell them what your needs are. Oh, I mean, they're so used to saying, this is what I need from you, and it's all one way. And we're encouraging them, yes, to look at the child's needs, but don't ignore your needs. It's not going to be one way you do everything the child wants. No, there are limits to it. It's got to be collaborative. The solution has to meet your needs as well as their needs.
So a second question for you, kind of in the same vein. And I think you both know well, because you were a sponsor of our Beyond Behaviorism conference, how I feel about a lot of the traditional approaches around behavior. A lot of them are very steeped in, rewards and consequences. And all of which in my mind is, faulty because it's assuming intent. It's assuming that everything beneath the behavior is intent. And if you only had the right little thing that we could dangle in front of you, you would be able to meet the demand or have the skill or whatever the case may be. And that's so common, but I think really misguided. So my question for you is that a lot of the children that you support, when you go into school, you might be going into a place where they have well-intentioned programs there to provide tiger bucks or husky bucks or whatever kind of bucks and incentives and all of these things to try to, get the behavior that they're after, that in my opinion are often not really meeting the need. But what this does is it creates the expectation for the child. So when a child begins to problem solve, they may think about what they know. What have they been offered before? So they might automatically say, well, gee, if I had this reward, or if I had this, or maybe if you did this for me, or maybe if you took away this, the child may think about solutions that have been used unsuccessfully previously, because that's what they've been introduced to from adults. So how do you help encourage children to really think about solutions that aren't necessarily the same solutions that have failed them up until this point? Because, for them, it may be entirely new because all they can think of is, gee, well, maybe if you gave me this, maybe if you gave me that, maybe that would do it. So how do you do that? I mean, I'm curious, and I live my own journey in that as well. And, I saw the downside of like the chronic rewards. I mean, I remember with my son at one point, like we'd go do something. Do I get a prize for that? Well, no. But that's what we do. So Sue, tell me, how do you help kids figure out how to advocate for things other than the things that they often are being told that are the rewards or the consequences they've been given historically?
Well, when I offer solutions to the problems, my perspective on what would work, I never offer those things.
Right.
And if they ask for them, I'll say, well, that doesn't make sense to me, because then you'll think everything needs a reward. So no, I can't offer you that.
Right. Yeah, maybe even asking the question of, well, would a cookie really help you to be able to do that? Or is there something else you need to be able to do that? Maybe just again, I'm a big believer in curiosity. I think curiosity goes so far. And I'm also a believer in simple approaches like, the 5 whys, like ask, well, why do you think a cookie would help? What is it? Oh, and why do you think, and you continue to ask those questions. And sometimes people begin to find their own way through this. And even kids will be like, oh, well, gee, maybe that isn't the answer. But again, we're so conditioned sometimes to, well, these are the things that have been done. Staci, what are your thoughts?
Well, I was going to say, this is why in our framework, we focus on strengths, and we encourage people to incorporate strengths into the skill. If the skill is math and they have dinosaurs, use dinosaurs for every math activity.
Right.
It's when you incorporate the strengths, you don't need a little dangle, because they're like, ooh, cool. This is my favorite. I do want to do this. I do want to get better at this skill. And so we take away the whole need for rewards with this framework.
And I would say, even beyond the strengths, incorporate what's really meaningful here. Incorporate the connection, incorporate the genuine connection and relationship, and all of that. I mean, that's where real change happens, right? And it's not, I always hate terms like therapeutic rapport. It's not creating something that's not sincere and genuine. I mean, it really, with kids, I mean, it has to be genuine. I mean, so I'm sure you could talk about this, but I mean, I think about a lot of the neurodivergent, children that I know, and they will see right through insincerity. It really has to be that. And we all do all of our best for the people that we're connected to, the people we care about. And, developing those relationships can go so far in a lot of this work, I think.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So we are about reaching the end of our time. And anybody, if you have any final questions, feel free to put those in the chat. We did have a thank you here. Thank you for your responses. Appreciate guidance. Okay. Stress response and curiosity rather than being labeled. And thank you for the question as well. Anybody has any final questions, feel free to put those in the chat, and we'll get to kind of our last question here shortly. I appreciate that you shared a bit more about your course and some of the free resources that you offer, and we'll make all of those links available to folks as well. And of course, if people are interested in learning more about your work, where can they reach out and where can they find you or connect with you if they're a school interested in some training or an individual, what's the best way for people to connect with you?
Usually going to our website, www.makingsenseofautism.com. And then we do a weekly just short Q&A that we post on YouTube. I usually, as a practicing therapist, I ask Sue different questions that pop up for me and other therapists. And so on YouTube, and then Instagram and Facebook.
Excellent. Excellent. Well, I'm really excited to have you guys back here again, and I appreciate you joining me.
Thanks.
It's always a pleasure to talk to you, and I really appreciate the work that you have been doing together, and kind of the different angles that you're bringing to this, and I think it's so important. So as we wrap up here, I just want to give you an opportunity. Any final thoughts you want to leave us with? Anything exciting you have coming up in the coming year, or just any final thoughts? And Staci, I'll start with you.
Yeah. So as I mentioned, we're really excited to next year really focus on assessments, because we see that need for professionals to have a neuro-affirming assessment, an assessment that gives a different lens of who the child is and the support that they need. So our course will open up in February again, where they can get the assessment tools. And then, just continuing to help schools feel supported and understand their students, so that they don't have to use the other compliance modes.
Yeah. And I feel like maybe it's wishful thinking, but I feel like there's more of us out there talking about the need to shift away from these compliance-based approaches. As I mentioned, you were sponsors for our Beyond Behaviorism conference. I'm not sure this publicly, but we're public. Why not? I'm planning to do Beyond Behaviorism 2 in the coming year. So I want to do another conference kind of in that same vein, in that same focus, introducing people to ideas and approaches to move, kind of beyond these very behaviorally driven approaches. And I know that event that we did in May, probably well over, I don't even know how many, probably 600 or 700 people that have attended that event. We had schools that were getting multiple licensees for teachers. And, I was hearing from behavioral folks that were like, hey, this is really leading me to question some of the things that we've been doing. And it's been really enlightening. So, I hope to see some of that work continue to have people, kind of moving, beyond behaviors and moving into approaches that are neurodiversity affirming, because we talk about, kind of trauma informed and neuroscience aligned and neurodiversity affirming, relationship driven and collaborative. But I mean, that's, very, very parallel to the work that you're doing as well. So I appreciate that.
Absolutely.
Sue, so any words of wisdom I need words of wisdom. Any words of wisdom for us, or anything you want to leave us with as we wrap up today?
I would like to encourage people to recognize the hardest thing is making that mental shift themselves. Like you said, from labeling to being curious, from judgments to listening. But what they're going to get out of this, and what Staci has seen, her assistants have seen, instant results. This approach will get you instant change in the autistic individual, because they feel heard and understood. And as Staci has pointed out, she mentioned to a new client, an adolescent, saying that, okay, here's what I want to know from you. This is what I want to learn about you. And her instant change was like, you get me. You get me. And she was dying to work with her. And the kids, I adored the kids, and they adored working with me because I listened to them. And you're going to see instant change with this approach.
Yeah, love it. Yeah, and the change is, it's relocating this, right? The change is not starting with the child. The change is starting with the adult mindset. Right. And you kind of said that, making that shift. And I'll take it one step further and say, it seems like when you make that shift, you can't unmake it. Once you see the world differently and you see it through this lens, it really changes everything. And it starts with you. And, you know, not to say that you'll be perfect if you start on this journey and you begin to see some of these things. Trust me, you know, I have my own stress responses that come out of nowhere sometimes. But, you know, at the same time, when you go on this journey and you're led by curiosity, I think it can make all the difference in the world. And it really can lead to such different outcomes for kids who are, you know, chronically misunderstood and whose outcomes can be really very sad if things do not change. And yeah, I appreciate both of you. I appreciate the work you do. It's been great to connect with you and have you be part of some of the things that we've done. And I think there'll be more opportunities. We're planning for the conference coming up this year. Probably an open RFP process, so we'll be looking for some talks. So I'll plant that seed now. So you know, if you're interested, and you know, thank you both for all that you do and sharing you know, your journey. You know, Sue, I always find kind of your personal journey, you know, really impactful. And you know, I think you know, still to this day, there are so many individuals that I run across, and it usually happens as a result of their children who have been diagnosed as autistic, who at 50 or 55 years old are finding out that, oh, I'm autistic. And things begin to make sense in a different light. But what if we can change the world to make it so that, you know, we're supporting all people in better ways?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Thank you for the opportunity you've given us.
Thank
Absolutely.
you so much.
It's my pleasure. So we're going to wrap up here. And again, all of those that joined us here live today, I want to thank you for being here with us. It means a lot when you join us. And of course, we encourage you, share these conversations. You know, these are available on the platforms you watch them. We have the podcast audio version available. Share them with your colleagues, share them with other families. You know, that's how change happens. We find these things and we share them and we can really affect some change. So if you will join me in saying goodbye to our audience here, I'm going to ask you both to stick around for a moment. And I want to thank you behind the curtain here. But thank you all for being here today. We will see you again, I think, in another 2 weeks. And thank you so much.